Okay, so let's talk about the big one now, and that is the new 2021 Shimano Antares DC. Now, I don't think anyone saw this reel coming. I mean, I certainly didn't. Now, I did read this Japanese fishing blog where the guy did speculate that a new one was coming this year, but I just dismissed it as speculation. But lo and behold, he was right, and here it is. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that it is based off the much smaller 2019 Antares 70, but taking a look at the specs on this new Antares, Shimano did more than just put a DC brake unit into the Antares 70. In fact, Shimano claims that they refined the already awesome 4x8 DC brake unit for this reel. They claim that they programmed this version of the 4x8 DC to have a quicker response than the previous unit. So how will more responsive DC brakes help? Well, as far as overrun control goes, that means that the CPU will activate the electromagnetic brakes sooner when it senses a blow up. Now, as far as casting distance goes, it should help a little by not only activating a little bit quicker, but also deactivating the brakes quicker to help keep this spool speed higher for the duration of the cast, which equals more distance. At least that's my theory. Now, another change is that they gave this new Antares DC the narrower MGL3 spool. Now, the old model had the old style MGL spool, but the new model gets the newer spool. Now, this should help the new Antares DC with lighter lures and pitching. Now, the brakes and the spool are not the only changes. Shimano gave this new Antares better saltwater protection versus the previous model, which was reported to corrode on its finish after fishing it in saltwater. They also added a super high-speed XG ratio, which will come with a much needed longer 90mm handle. They also added one extra bearing to the main shaft for a total of 2, and this was supposed to eliminate any kind of minute movement or play. And last but not least, they moved the spool tension from the inside to the outside of the reel with this very DAIWA-like zero adjuster looking knob. Now, it definitely looks better than having nothing there like the old model, as you can see. Now, as expected, this new Antares DC is a monster caster in testing. As you can see, Takuma Hata empties out the entire spool on this cast using I think a 1-ounce rattle trap. So you would expect that this would be a no-brainer purchase for me, right? I mean, it's a longer casting Antares DC that's more refined and also much smaller and compact. Well, maybe a younger version of me would have just automatically bought it, but I'm older and wiser, and since this is a reel with a retail price of over $750, I did a little bit more research, which leads us to story time. So about a year ago, I did a casting Olympics set of videos where I put 6 reels with 6 different braking systems against each other in a couple of cast battles. Now go and check out those videos if you haven't already. But anyways, the 2016 Antares DC ended up easily crushing all the other reels in the end. But here's the thing. It would have won by an even bigger margin than it did if the reel was much smaller. Now the current Antares DC is tall, it's wide, and it's kind of heavy with its weight spread around the reel, and it's not very centralized. So that prevented me from putting in full force cast swings like I could with the other smaller, more compact reels. And it's the only reason that I've only fished the 16 Antares DC probably less than 5 times since I bought this reel a couple of years ago. It's just very big and unwieldy and awkward to fish and cast, at least for me. So it appears that Shimano has solved that problem by just using the super small and compact frame of the 2019 Antares 70, right? Unfortunately, it's just not that simple. Now, when you look at the new reel, you immediately think that, but when you look at the numbers, specifically the spool diameter, it has the same huge 37mm spool diameter as the old model, while the Antares 70 has a much smaller 34mm spool. So after seeing this and doing more digging, it turns out that the new Antares DC is actually using a bigger form of the 2019 Antares frame. And that was a huge disappointment for me. Now it is visually smaller than the old model, as you can see in these pictures. It is a little bit shorter and definitely narrower, but when you compare it to the 2019 Antares 70, you can see it's much bigger. In fact, to me it looks closer to the size of the 16 DC versus the 19 non-DC Antares. Now couple that with the fact that they used basic Shimano parts bin components for the handle nut, the knobs, and the drag star that you can find on much cheaper Shimanos, I held off on putting my pre-order in. So what I'm going to do is just wait until the Japanese YouTubers make their videos on this reel, get some more visual information on its size and performance, and then make my decision. Now if you're interested in getting this reel, the right hands come out in March and the lefties come out in May. And I expect the street price to be closer to about $600.